Hi everyone, I'm Kristy Christie, Chair of IABC Asia Pacific Region, and I'm so pleased to present to you all Anthony Bull, who is an IABC member based in Wellington. Now, Anthony has very kindly accepted my request to spend time out of his day off talking a little about his career and introducing him to the IABC community at large. Now, Anthony currently works as the Principal Engagement and Communications Advisor for the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment of New Zealand. And he is also the IBC iTora New Zealand Membership Director. So he serves on the board, volunteering his time, and he has a background in government communications. He helps to share the great work that the public service does for the Kiwis in a noisy and very cluttered environment. He's fueled by coffee, which is funny because we just had a conversation about what he had for lunch, and coffee was definitely included. And he writes about, it's also included in the interview, and writes about his coffee adventures at themagicroast.com. Now, the link for his blog will be down in the description below, so definitely check it out. But Anthony, thank you so much. Hello.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me.
It's so nice of you to do this. I'm not sure I would spend my day off taking an interview, so I'm glad that you are up for it. Now, Anthony, we've been having such a good chat that I almost forgot to press the record button. So as spoilers for the audience, I'm aware of some of the things that Anthony is going to say, and I'm keen to learn more because it's definitely whet my appetite. Now, one of the laughs that we had today was about how there is a saying in New Zealand, apparently, and possibly Australia, that don't be fooled by how beautiful it starts out, but tall poppies get cut down. And what this means is it's very difficult for people who believe in this statement to share about their achievements. And I was trying to help almost coach Anthony to, pull out those suppressed moments and emotions and memories of some of the things that he has gone through these past 12 months, and that he would consider it a celebration. Now, it was very difficult, but I'm pleased to mention that I managed to get one or two to be precise, examples that he'll be able to share with us. Now, Anthony, I have to ask, because of all places to have been in the past 12 months when businesses have been so severely impacted by COVID-19, the pandemic, and the resulting fallout from all of that. Even if you're based in New Zealand, quick action was needed at the very start. And New Zealand has been praised for what they have done to be able to achieve the results that they've achieved so far. Can you tell me a bit about that initial period when you had, you found out that we're going to be going into this stage 4 lockdown, and what was that like?
It was scary. It was bizarre. It was hard to get your head around, and it was sort of unbelievable. I guess the year had started pretty weirdly anyway, and with the Australian bushfires that New Zealand was being impacted on because of all the soot and the dust and the smoke was being blown over to New Zealand. And there was a whole bunch of other weird stuff happening around the world, Kobe Bryant's death, and bizarre things. And then you kind of hear about this illness in China, and you think, right, okay, man, I really hope they pull through. But that's something happening on the other side of the world, and little old isolated New Zealand will be fine. And then escalated over a matter of weeks, like it did for everyone. But went from everything's going to be fine to our Prime Minister, when she was visiting Australia, saying we've had our first case in New Zealand, and then bam, lockdown. It was crazy.
Yeah, I cannot even imagine just coming to terms with what's happening, especially at the government level, because my perspective is, of course, from just a regular resident of Malaysia. And at that time, for me, we had finished Leadership Institute, and we were hearing about this virus, and we were all leaving IBC the Austin area and flying home. And I was starting to hear of, people are scanning for temperatures and they're checking whether you're ill and fevers and things like that. And I was thinking, what is, this is strange. This is really strange. And to be going through those different, layovers, and also having all of those countries check. And I was like, okay, this is really big. This is big, but I had no idea what was coming. And what was it like to be told that, hey, we have to enter a lockdown now, stage 4 lockdown, and you're in the Ministry of Business. I'm just going to call it MBIE just for short. But Rel, if you're watching this, Rel is, she advocates jargon-free Fridays, and she's not going to be happy I've just created another one. What was it like? Because you mentioned, I think you said 36 hours to come up with a policy. Is that right?
Yeah, so parts of government had already swung into action, particularly our Ministry of Health, for about 4 weeks before we headed into lockdown, maybe a bit longer. And they were busy trying to figure out the pandemic response and where everything was. But as things escalated, it became clearer that New Zealand was going to have to take a pretty hard approach to it. And about 36 hours before we went into our lockdown, we realized that we needed some policy work around businesses, or what we called essential services, the services and businesses and people who could remain open and operate and travel during our stage 4 lockdown. And it was about 36 hours. I'd rolled into work. It was a sunny day, and I honestly thought, excellent, I can just tidy a few things up and then do some shopping on my way home, and that was it. And my boss said, hey, you need to go upstairs, drag a colleague along, because there's this thing that we're standing up called essential services, and we need some work done now. And you go up there, and there's probably about 24 of our MBIE staff and some staff from other parts of government and our Business New Zealand kind of support groups. And it was an organised panic, I guess. It wasn't quite panic stations where everyone's running around flapping. It was more of a like, we've got a massive task ahead of us. We need to define all of these rules and make some decisions that are going to really impact people's livelihoods. And that was it weighed heavy on everyone there. And we knew we had to get it right, or as right as we could in the short amount of time that we had to do it.
And I mean, in the end, whether or not some of the things could have been perfected, some things maybe you might change in hindsight with a lot of experience that comes from going through that process. The fact is that 36 hours in a room trying to identify each and every category of business, whether they can remain open, what are the consequences of doing that, and what are the consequences if they don't, having to both require to have that empathy, but also that pragmatic concern for what it is that it could spiral into. It must have been both just, it's beyond a job at that point, isn't it? It's, people who will be immediately affected by the decisions that you made in that room. And did that at all cross your mind while you were doing it? Or did you find yourself able to go into that space of, okay, let's every single decision, let's really hash this out and think about it from that almost more accepting point of view?
We all knew people who were going to be impacted by it. And they had, they were in our ear saying, just tell us what's happening or make these rules to try and help us out. But the Ministry of Health and the central government approach was all about the public health aspects. And we had to keep coming back to that. Whenever we had a really tough decision, we're like, well, what are the public health impacts of making this decision? Do we even know what the public health impacts are? For example, one of the kind of more strange categories was whether we would allow someone to sell stuff at home on our eBay equivalent, package it up and send it in the courier. Was that a public health risk? Should we be, linking households up in that way? And they were the sorts of things that we were trying to weigh up, while also knowing that people needed food, people needed access to medicines, and there were some really essential things that we just had to remain open or figure out, make some rules up so they could operate in a way that really minimized that potential risk of spreading COVID around the country. Yeah.
It's incredible also because they comms was already in the room right when the policy was being made. And this is not necessarily true for general policies that you see come across in different governments across the region and across the globe. What was it like? Did it ever cross your mind, even in that moment, that I'm in this room and people are asking me questions and asking for our input and asking for our expertise and advice on how to best really communicate what is going on, but also what were the right decisions to make in terms of the business aspect and the health aspect? Did it dawn on you what was happening at that time?
Yeah, the enormity of it and the responsibility, kind of weighed heavy, I think, on the shoulders. It was myself and a colleague from comms who were in there trying to ask the questions that would usually ask, who's the audience for this? What's the really key, simple thing that we want people to take away from this? And how we're going to get the messages out there in the best way, that there's a single source of truth, all of that, the kind of comms fundamentals that you keep trying to come back to over and over again. But very quickly it turned into okay, here's a category, let's just talk about what this means. And we'd be in a room and some of the smartest people in government and in business were sitting there, and we're all just there almost as equals, just weighing stuff out. It sort of didn't matter where you came from or what your background was or what part of the business you were representing. It was like, let's talk about the decisions that we're about to make and what the implications are. And then let's figure out what the best way of getting this information out there is. And it had to be that the comms was the second thought. It was we need to get the rules as right as we can early on. And, it was difficult, and it was, wasn't perfect, but we weren't shooting for perfect, and we knew we weren't going to get perfect. And in that short period before lockdown, that wasn't the end of the work. Over the next 4 to 6 weeks, as we went into level 4 lockdown, which is our strictest, and then down to level 3, we were looking at those rules every day and making tweaks. And as new information came in and as the COVID situation developed, we were making new decisions that had bigger implications, or we were thinking about how to relax the rules to allow more people to access things. It was an absolutely amazing time, and it sort of didn't let up all of last year.
No, I think if I remember correctly, you mentioned something about having to do this twice a day, every day for 4 weeks at first. And that's even despite how well New Zealand came out on the other side. That's still an intense amount of work and effort and just mental space and emotional space, right? Because you're also worried about your own family during this time and what's happening within your own personal sphere.
Absolutely. And we were being forced to work at home for the most part, as well. And as things developed, we were getting requests from our Prime Minister's office to appear in press conferences, and having to figure out the rules and then figure out a way to communicate them in a way that was really clear, and then prep our spokesperson to get out there and say the message, and then field all the questions from the journalists and go back and reiterate. And it was layers upon layers upon layers upon, and everyone was in this boat, but we were working pretty long hours. We ended up working shifts, 4 days on, 4 days off, and then having to manage, the home life and the kids who were in a weird space, and then underlying a lot of this was actually, the community just really rallied around. And I think, and this has been said before about New Zealand's response, is that, there was a thing and there was a directive, and our government said, we need to do this for the, you got to think about your grandma and all the impacts you have. And everyone just said, yep, cool, done. All right, we're home now. We're doing our thing. We're doing what we need to do. And it was, I've never experienced that sort of response before. I never, the country was just united. And it made it a lot easier. I couldn't imagine working in an environment where the culture was different, where there was a lot less trust in the government and a lot less trust in the approach, because that would have just added a layer of complexity, which I'm sure our colleagues around APAC have had to deal with.
Yeah, Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm even in Malaysia right now. We've gone into our own lockdown, and this is day 4. So completely agree that it's such a difficult thing to do if you don't have sufficient trust built in this area. But talking about trust, the fact that you were in the room, Anthony, now you're not allowed to tell me that you're building on the foundations of previous communicators and standing on the shoulders of giants. I believe you. But there was trust that you were the right person to be in that room on that day, considering the gravity and the seriousness of the decisions that were being made. If you look back on your communication career and your ability to think strategically, as well as clearly the ability to have core risk assessment skills as well, because that's part of the reason that conversation takes such depth with deciding on categories, because you're trying to also assess risk, and that's a key area that comms brings to the table. Do you think there were parts of your career building up that led you to this moment where you felt that you look back and it sort of makes sense as to why you're in the room? I know it's hard, but be honest.
I was only there because comms professionals before me had done.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to cut this out of the video. I'm just saying it's getting edited.
But I mean, in seriousness though, I mean, there had been parts of my career where I'd been involved in some pretty meaty crisis comms scenarios, or scenarios where the potential for things going pretty pear-shaped pretty quickly was very, very real. And I learned early on. I had a great couple of mentors during my career, and I'm going to call one out, Jackie Martin, who is the current chair of the IABC Aotearoa board. This is not sucking up, but my first proper comms job was in Jackie Martin's team at New Zealand Post, and I learned really quickly from her that there's no point flapping and there's no point panicking, because everyone else is doing that, and actually what people in the business are actually looking for is just a calm face and a calm head, and you just need to be able to take it all in and internalize it and panic on the inside, but kind of just be this air of everything's going to be okay. There's a way through it. We just need to think about it and step through it. And I think a few times in my career where I'd been able to kind of apply that had sort of led me up to being involved in some other crisis comm scenarios at MB, and then kind of leading into the COVID stuff. So I think just my approach was known around the place. It's relaxed, bordering on looking like you're just not worried at all. While just internalizing it, and of course my team before me. And I have to say this because
all right, I'll let this go.
I had a great team. I have a great team at MB, and a lot of them had been involved in some pretty gnarly stuff. And I think just the reputation that the team and the reputation that comms had is, it's not just my input; it's input of many great professionals.
I think that is the thing. The reputation it takes a long time to build, and it really comes from real life experiences and people being a part in that room, experiencing what it is that you do and what is the value and the contribution that you bring, really speaking volumes for itself. That makes me also understand what even drove me, or I'm sure a lot of many other comms professionals, to consider certification. But would you say that part of you of wanting to bring in that SCMP, the Strategic Communication Management Professional, that it's a certification you've earned now, and it wasn't an easy one. What were your driving forces behind that? What interested you in it?
There was a couple of things, actually. I think not through any fault of the comms profession, but we sort of are the kind of poor cousins, I guess, to other professions like lawyers and accountants who go through a vast amount of training and have to be a part of, professional body to even practice what they do. And I'm really keen on, and it's not lifting the standard of comms, because I think the comms and comms professionals have a really high standard, but it's lifting the awareness that we do all the same things as lawyers and accountants. We work hard to stay up with the latest trends. We're always trying to learn, and we apply in ethics, and we do all of these things in a really managed and logical way. And I think the certification helps us show that. It helps us kind of add the rigor behind the stuff that we already know we do really well. So that was kind of the key driving point for us to kind of get the certification, because then I can point to it and say, hey, look, there's a thing that we do in the comms profession that we have to study for, there's an exam for, and we have to keep on top of professional development. We can't just sit here and stagnate. We're always striving to learn and striving to get better, just like all these other professions that you already have in the room who you're looking for strategic advice from. Comms is at that level.
Yeah, exactly. And when did you get the SCMP, Anthony?
I think it was September last year. Last year was a blur. So it was our board president at the time, Chris Dutton, said, hey, we should do this, and it's a really good thing to do. Do you have the time and space? And the answer should have been, no, I don't have the time and space to do this. I can't take on something else. But I did. And I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really glad you did. I as well, because considering of the timing that you could have chosen, people will look back and see, what was 2020 like, and you have the ability to say, oh yeah, I did this, and also I did this. Well, you probably would even talk about the achievement of the first one. I hope that they know to ask you and draw that out of you. But yeah, it's incredible. How did you prepare for it? Was there any preparation that you undertook?
Yeah, I was quite nervous, and I don't know whether it'd been the anxiety of the year, but I felt like that I needed to really smash it out of the park, because I didn't want to let anyone down who said I should do it, and because of my driving motivation behind it to kind of raise the level of comms, I didn't want to be the one that went, oh yeah, I really want the whole profession to be here, and I didn't make it. So I put a lot of pressure on myself. So I went hard studying, and I didn't quite know what to expect, but I got the handbook, the IABC Communicators Handbook, and I went on the certification website, and I had a look at the things that potentially in there, and I spent a good chunk of time going through the chapters in the handbook, studying them up, having a look at the gold quills, and looking at a whole bunch of case studies and doing a whole bunch of reading. So I felt like that I was really prepared for who knows what questions were coming my way. But I think, you did it for the exam to get the certification, but actually it was a really good exercise regardless. There were some things and there were some gaps that I had that I didn't know I had. I don't come from a formal communications background. I studied marketing and commercial law and stumbled into internal comms to start my career. So everything I know, I essentially learned on the job, and there are some gaps that I had. And the process allowed me to fill those gaps and point me into some really interesting directions. The gold quills, the gold quill case studies. If IABC members do nothing else, their professional development is to read those case studies. I'm not ashamed to say I stole quite a few tactics and strategies out of those various case studies from all around the world. They're amazing.
No, I'm 100% with you on this. The gold quill case studies are such a wealth of information, and I feel that not enough of us realize it until we take the certification exam and read them for it, right? And you start realizing that, wow, I really should keep track of these. And so now I'm looking forward to this year's Gold Quill case study winners to publish their material, because I want to go and see what was the best of the best. And there's the level of work and how every initiative is tied back to business outcomes. Like once you go through the SCMP, I tell people that if anyone has ever had any doubt as to whether comms can be quantified and tied back to show value, read the GoQuil case studies. It's the absolute, it's just amazing. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And you learn a whole bunch of new things. And it also reaffirms some of the things you're already doing. I mean, as we touched on, tōpōhi syndrome in New Zealand and Australia means that if we do a good job or we think we're doing a good job, we're really not sure. And we're definitely not going to ask, and no one's going to tell us. So reading the gold quills means, I'm doing a couple of these things and they've been recognized, and excellent. I am on the right track after all.
You went from essentially having to deal with the entire pandemic, the consequences of that, the communication that just went around that's been recognized as being excellent work, to one of your later projects, or maybe I'm mixing up the timelines, but I want to bring this in, and that's about the saving of the endangered flora and fauna. And that's so random that I can't even connect this in a very nice, beautiful moderating session type of way. So I just have to throw it out there. Hey, endangered flora and fauna. How are these two things linked at your job? How did you get roped into this?
The beauty of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is that it's basically an amalgamation of 6 or 7 different government departments, including business, but also randomly including science. So it's through the science portfolio which I get to look after some really awesome things. And one of those projects was launched on Tuesday this week. It was delayed because we've had some pretty gnarly flooding here in New Zealand, so there's a bit of a state of emergency down in the South Island. But yeah, there was a project where the Crown linked in with the local iwi, or the local Maori tribe down in the South Island, to buy a piece of land called the Kaitariti Spit, just south of Christchurch, which is home to these wonderful endemic and endangered flora and fauna. There's endangered moth, there is some geckos, some skinks, New Zealand's only poisonous spider, a whole bunch of plants, and it was on this area of land, a finger of land which separates one of the most polluted lakes in New Zealand from the Pacific Ocean. And there was a really big desire to work with the iwi down there to come together as partners to buy this land so we could protect it. And so we could do some economic development things, including some aerospace stuff. And I went down to Christchurch a few weeks ago, and I got to sit with a couple of the people from the tribe, or the Runanga, down there, and they told me about their deep connection to this land. It used to be the main thoroughfare between the lower and upper South Islands back before the English came to New Zealand, just because of its location, and there'd be wars fought over it, and the whole area means so much to the people down there, and being able to be trusted to help tell a bit of that story and be a part of a project which helps protect it and rejuvenates it for the future, as well as kind of the economic development side of things, which is really awesome. We're going to get to build some aerospace facilities down there, and maybe even a spaceport. And you think, you're trying to save a moth, and you're trying to build a big thing that's probably going to have an economic impact because it's a big rocket. How does that stack up? But the way the project's going to work as partners, we're going to figure out a way to do that where it complements each other, and the revenue that they're going to be able to get from the aerospace stuff will be invested into the environment stuff. And it sets out an amazing track for the future generations there, and protects it for all the past generations. Everyone has kind of been there and fallen on it. So go from craziness of COVID to telling wonderful and beautiful stories is a bit of a head scratcher. But, I mean, that's the nature of comms, I think.
No, I love that in this conversation, we essentially covered how the role and the work that you do has both helped to protect and preserve history in the past, has actively been involved in trying to really just reassure and protect our future. I mean, our current circumstances, basically with the pandemic, but then you're looking to the future as well with the aerospace technology and reinvesting into the environment and protecting it for future generations. So I can't think of a better. I could not have planned that. That naturally came out. I hope you realized you're a tall poppy, Anthony. Not to be cut down, just a tall poppy.
I'm going to hide now. I'm going to conversation. Oh no. Oh no! I like my face or something. I can't be seen to be talking about this.
No. We'll blur your face out and change your voice. Everything will be fine. But definitely visit his blog, themagicrose.com, and learn more about Anthony. But Anthony, this has been such a joy, this conversation, this interview. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. And I'm guessing that if anybody has any questions and would like to reach out and connect with you, they can do so on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. I'm also on LinkedIn, everyone. Our links will be below in the description box. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this. And Anthony, thank you for being here and for sharing your stories.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for getting some of this stuff out. It's probably a good thing to do.
Oh, yeah. I have a gift. What can I say? No. All right, everyone. Bye. Take care.